So as I told you, we are now getting on highway number 1, which leads to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the holiest place in the world for the Jewish people. This is where the first temple stood. This is where the second temple stood. And this is where the third temple will be with the coming of the Messiah. Jerusalem is the holiest place in the world for the Christians, the birthplace of Christianity, the cradle of religion. Jerusalem is a city that is holy to the Muslims, second only in importance after Mecca and Medina. So with that, my friends, I'd like to welcome you into this wonderful and timeless city. Welcome to Jerusalem. So good morning, my friends. Here we are at the top of Mount of Olives and viewing a magnificent view from east towards west. And the most obvious thing that can be seen here is, of course, this golden dome referred to as the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is not a mosque, but nevertheless it is a very holy place for the Muslims, as it is the place from where, according to their tradition, their Prophet Muhammad, in his vision, ascended from here through the 7 levels of heaven. Also, this Dome of the Rock stands on the exact same place where the first and second temple stood, and where the third one is supposed to be. And yet another name that is given to the Temple Mount is Mount Moriah, where Abraham was about to sacrifice his son Isaac so as to show his love for God. So basically you can see that this is an extremely holy site, and as long as the Dome of the Rock stands there, the temple cannot be built and the Messiah cannot come. So it is the source and root of all our political, social, and religious problems in the country. And because it's a matter of religion, there is no right or wrong, because what is right for you is not necessarily right for me. Going back to the Dome of the Rock, and if we go further to the left and slightly back, we see 2 gray domes, a large and a small one. This is the rooftop of the Church of Holy Sepulchre. The Church of Holy Sepulchre, in which the last 5 stations of the Via Dolorosa are located. To its left, we see yet another tower. This is the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer, one of 3 structures that the German Chancellor Wilhelm II built in 1897. He built, as I said, 3. The first one of those 3 is the Lutheran Church. The second one is the Catholic Church that we see way over there. It's the gray cone church with a tower to its left, and that is the Church of Dormition. And yet a third structure that he did was a Christian non-denominational hospital named after his wife, Augusta Victoria. So basically he covered all of his bases, ending up okay with the Protestants, the Catholics, and the non-affiliated Christians. To the left of the Lutheran Church, we see yet another gray roof and dome, and this is the Mosque of El Aktsa. El Aktsa means in Arabic, corner of the universe, and tradition says Muhammad rode his horse to the corner of the universe prior to ascending the 7 levels of heaven. To the left of that, within the city limits, we see these modern structures with many arches in them. That's part of the Jewish quarter. And behind them is a long beige building with green windows, that being the King David Hotel, a very famous hotel that in 1946 was headquarters of British military intelligence, that as an act of rebellion against the British was blown up partially by the underground movements. They actually planted a bomb there and gave a warning to the British by phone, but the British did not heed to that warning, and the bomb exploded, people were wounded and killed, and Menachem Begin jumped up to the #1 slot of the most wanted terrorist lists. Onwards to the left, we see the walls of the old city climbing up to Mount Zion, and at the very top of Mount Zion is the Church of Dormition, the Catholic Church of Dormition that was built by the German Chancellor in 1897. Onwards to the side of the mountain, you can see there is on the halfway another gray roof, and that is the Church of St. Peter in Galicanti. This being the place where Peter denied Jesus for the third time before the crowing of the rooster, as the scriptures say so in Luke 22. Down below, we have what is called the Kidron Valley, which separates Mount of Olives from the Temple Mount. In the Kidron Valley, at the very bottom, just over here, we see a white cone, and that is the tomb of Absalom, son of King David. Let me get out of your way, that way you will be able to see it much better. So basically, we have the tomb of Absalom, and we continue onwards to where these buses are parked down below, and that is just in front of the Church of All Nations, also known as the Church of the Agony, in the Garden of Gethsemane. Above it, the golden onions that we see here, this is what is referred to as the Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene, and above it, yet another church that is called Dominus Flevit. The path that comes down is the path of Palm Sunday. This is the entrance of Jesus, his glorious entrance into Jerusalem, the Sunday of Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday before Resurrection Sunday or Easter Sunday. And in front of us, we see the Golden Gate, or the Gate of Mercy, or the Eastern Gate, which is the only of the 8 gates of the Old City that is shut. It was shut by the Muslims in the end of the 7th century, so as to prevent the entrance of the Messiah. And you can see here that I'm standing in the middle of the Jewish cemetery, the oldest active cemetery in the world. It's been in use for the past 2,000 years, and it is a Jewish cemetery because the Jews believe that the resurrection of the dead will start here with the coming of the Messiah. And they all want to be buried here so as to be the first to resurrect. And also, you can see over here the many little stones on the different graves. This is a Jewish way of saying, we have not forgotten you. Your memory is solid as a rock. Also, I think it is cheaper and lasts longer than flowers, so it's a good solution. Now, this is, of course, the path that Jesus followed on his glorious entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, the Sunday before Easter Sunday. And everybody was singing Hosanna. Okay, so you see it's fairly steep, and as I said, it is a two-way street, so you will see it. And hope that I don't have to prove to you that it's a two-way street, because it requires some maneuvering over here. And here's one of the 9 Karkash brothers. They all look the same. They all try to sell you different things. Same things always, so you see them like everywhere. And this is the church of Dominus Flevit. The Lord has cried, where Jesus prophesies the destruction of Jerusalem. Look at that magnificent view in front of us. Imagine, instead of the Dome of the Rock, the temple in all its glory standing over there. And there is the proof. Oh, it's one of the Karkash brothers. Good thing it didn't happen, 10 seconds later, because now we have a narrow part. And please suck in all the air, so that we don't scrape the sides of the car. I remind you, this is a two-way street. Oh, here's another taxi. And coming up on the right is the Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene. We're almost coming to the bottom. One more last tricky part. Let's hope nobody comes our way. I don't feel like backing up right now. And here's some more of the Chinese. What do you reckon? Shall we wish them good morning? No, just let them pass this time. Got things to do today. It's a short day, Friday. That's it. And we made it. So this is the Garden of Gethsemane. We're just going to park the car and walk up to it. So we're actually right now in the Garden of Gethsemane, a place that Jesus knew very well. This being the place that he came to every time that he ascended to Jerusalem, at least 3 times a year during the Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Pentecost, and Passover. And because he felt here very comfortable, this is the place he chose to come to after the Last Supper in order to spend here the last of his hours agonizing and awaiting for the inevitable. And Jesus didn't want to die. He said, "Father, this cup is too full. Let it pass from me, if it is at all possible." And history shows us that every time that Jesus asked for something, it was immediately granted. But here, for the very first time, Jesus asks for something that is not going to be. Maybe because he had asked for something for himself. And knowing that it would not be fulfilled, he corrected himself, saying, "But let your will be done, not mine." And with that said and done, he was then at peace with himself. Now you can see that in this garden, there are few olive trees, some of which are extremely old. In fact, there is one in the far corner over there that was scientifically proven to be older than 2,000 years. And I actually say that it's 2,028 years old. You know why? Because 28 years ago when I started guiding, they told me it's 2,000 years old. Math, I know how to do. And of course, there's the Church of Nativity. What am I saying? The Church of the Agony, also known as Church of All Nations, because it was financed by many countries. The Church of Agony is where Jesus suffered, agonizing, sweating blood, sweat, and tears on the stone inside. So when we go in, you could actually see that stone and notice that the altar, the base of it, is shaped like a cup. The chalice, the cup that was too full. And the church itself is very dark and very somber because it is the place of the agony. It's a church that was built by the Italian architect Berlucci, and Berlucci is the favorite of the Vatican. So pretty much anything that we see that is Berlucci, we immediately know that it is a church built for the Franciscans. And the Franciscans are what is called the custodians of the Holy Land. They received the care of the vast majority, 99.9% of the Catholic places here in this land. Okay, now we're going to go into the church, but inside the church I cannot do any explanations, so you're welcome to photograph and take pictures, touch the stone and the altar if you want, but there is no speaking. So let's go in and see what's in there.
From the clutches of evil and violence. In you
So here, my friends, is that 2028-year-old tree that I told you about. And I'd like to tell you a story because when the temple was destroyed in the year 70 AD, all of the trees shed their leaves to show their sorrow. All but the olive tree. So the trees sent out a delegation of trees that asked the olive tree, saying to him, olive tree, how is it possible that you, of all trees, whose branches symbolize peace, whose wood was used for the making of the cross, whose fruit is used for the lighting of the candelabra at the temple, how can it be that you don't show your sorrow? And the olive tree responded to them, all of you, you wear your pain on the outside. I too am devastated at the loss. My heart is torn from within. And that is why from that moment onwards, olive trees that existed at the time of the temple are completely hollow, their heart still torn from within. And in fact, if you look at this tree behind me, you can see that it is completely hollow. And in fact, there's even a little tiny hole up here that you can see through it to the other side of the tree, right through it. Now notice that in spite of its being a very old tree, it still bears fruit, has new branches, stick coming out. And this is very much like they mention in Romans 11 of the old grafted into the new. So we're coming up onto Zion Gate, and that's another of the 8 gates of the old city. As I said, 7 of which are open and the 8th one which was shut. Notice that it's full of bullet holes, primarily from 1948 when the Jordanian Legion entered into the old city, destroyed everything that was here, and for 19 years Jews did not have access into the old city, Temple Mount, Western Wall. Only following the 6-Day War, when Jerusalem was reunited, did we come back, and we wanted to start rebuilding and renovating. But of course, we had to do archaeological excavations before, since every stone here hides history of 5,000 years. Also, you notice that we entered into the old city. And the old city is divided into 4 quarters. We have the Jewish quarter, Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, and Armenian quarter. And what we're seeing right now, this is part of the Armenian, which is here and behind us. And we're going through the Jewish quarter briefly up to the Church of Holy Sepulchre. Here we are going straight in. And are standing in front of the Church of Holy Sepulchre. The Church of Holy Sepulchre is one of 3 churches that was built originally by Helena, mother of Constantine, in the year 326. She built, as I said, 3 churches, the first one being the Church of Annunciation in Nazareth. The second is the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem. And the third one, this one right here, the Church of Holy Sepulchre. Of the 3, only the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem was never destroyed. The others were destroyed and rebuilt many times over, which means that the last 5 stations of the Via Dolorosa that are located here don't seem at all like what there was here back then. So in order to have a clearer grasp of things, what I would like for you to do is to undress this church and remain in your minds with the image of the naked rock that was here at the time. And having said that, we're going to go in, but before we do, notice that wooden ladder that's up on top, and I will mention it very shortly. This is called Skull Hill, Calvary. And the reason it's called like this is because without all this church built on top, the hill had a shape of a human skull. And it was chosen to be the place of crucifixion and capital punishment for everybody, not just Jesus. So of course, over time, there was an accumulation of skeletons and skulls which reinforced the name Skull Hill. And this is station number 10, where Jesus, unable to bear the thought that he was led to crucifixion, finally faints here at this place. This is also where the Roman soldiers started fighting amongst themselves for his robes. And if you look over here up on top, you'll be able to see in this beautiful mosaic an image of a man, a young boy, an angel, and a ram tangled in the bush. This is the scene of sacrifice of Isaac. Abraham about to sacrifice his only son so as to show his love for God. And all that symbolically here at the place where God sacrifices his son for humanity. Station 10 is Latin Orthodox controlled, and all of the mosaics that you see around, they all date to 1810 when this church was last rebuilt. All but this one up here, which is of course from 1141, from the Crusader period. Then, we're going to come over here, and we can see station 11, where Jesus was nailed to the cross. Now here we can see in this image, Jesus on the cross, at his feet, Mary Magdalene, the woman of ill repute that was converted to good by Jesus. We see Mary dressed in black, mourning for her son, not yet dead, and the Roman soldier anxious to get everything over and done with, he not wanting to be here. The place of the actual crucifixion. Here on the rock of Golgotha, they placed the cross and crucified Jesus. And at approximately 3 p.m., Jesus on the cross raised his head and shouted, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani? My God, why have thou forsaken me? And at that moment, he died on the cross. As he died, a large earthquake shakes the ground, and the rock of Golgotha cracks to the bottom. And the blood of Jesus drips into the crack as all life leaves the body, which was then removed from the cross, handed to Mary, and she brought it down to the place of burial. Station 12 is Greek Orthodox. And every time that you see here the iconostasis, the wall of images, and the abundance of lamps that can be seen all over, this is a dead giveaway about this being Greek Orthodox. So here we see the stone of anointment, the stone on top of which they put the body of Jesus after they removed it from the cross in order to cleanse it, anoint it, and wrap it in shrouds, as was customary with every Jew at the time. But by the time they brought Jesus down from the cross, it must have been 5, maybe 5:30 in the afternoon. The day was Friday, and back then they did not yet have daylight saving hours, which meant that the sun was about to set. And what happens at sunset Friday? The Sabbath begins, the one day of the week during which Jewish people do not touch dead bodies, nor do they do any kind of work. Therefore, by then it was already way too late to start digging a grave in which to bury Jesus. And so, in order not to leave the body outside for the entire weekend, one of his followers, a man called Joseph of Arimathea, decides to donate his own unused cave of burial in the garden very close by to here. And before we go and see that, notice that there are here 8 lamps, symbolizing the 8 streams of Christianity that are represented in this church. Armenians, Ethiopians, Coptics, Assyrians, Jacobites, Greek Orthodox, Latin Orthodox, and Roman Catholics. And each day, there's a different combination of lamps lit, symbolizing who controls what, which day. So we see the constant ongoing power struggle here in this church. And this struggle is so complicated that there is in here a status quo, meaning that nobody can change anything unless they get written consent from all the others, which seldom happens. In fact, had any of you come to here before November of 1999, you'd have seen that everything in this church was covered by scaffolding because they were renovating. But they weren't really renovating because they could not agree among themselves who will pay for the restoration. And so Until November of 1999, it was standing, and then the government of Israel ended up paying for it, because in March 2000 was the visit of Pope John Paul II. And remember the ladder I told you before? If you ever want to see a picture of this church without the ladder, you will have to find a picture that was taken before 1810, when this ladder was placed, and from that moment onwards, it is never touched, never moved, symbolizing the status quo. So this finally is station number 14, the burial cave that was donated by Joseph of Arimathea. And this burial cave, because of the so many times that this church was destroyed and rebuilt, and rebuilt and destroyed, of the original cave, there's almost nothing of original left. And in 1810, the Greek Orthodox, over the place of the cave, built this very large mausoleum divided into two chapels. The first chapel is called the Chapel of the Angel, and that is where the angel announced to Mary Magdalene, come Sunday morning, of the resurrection, telling her, "Do not seek him among the dead, for he is among the living." And in the middle of this chapel, you'll have a chance of glimpsing and seeing a stone altar, believed to have been done from the rolling stone that was cast aside come Sunday morning. The second chapel is the actual site of the Holy Sepulchre itself, the burial cave. For most Christians, considered to be the holiest place in the world. So my friends, this is a very interesting place. And it comes to pass when the time that the Passover lamb must be slaughtered, the time of unleavened bread, that Jesus says unto two of his disciples, "Go into town, follow a man carrying water, where he entereth, and ask the goodman of the house, saying, Our master says, Where wilt thou that we make the Passover meal? And he will show you to a large upper room. There prepare and make ready." So they did what they were told, and they came here. This is the room of the Last Supper. But I am sure none of you imagine this room to look like it does. And we'll deal with that with just a second. But before that, tell me please, what was that Last Supper? What happened here? Was it just a go out with a bang party? Of course not. Jesus, being a Jew, came here to celebrate the Passover. Now, what is the Passover? It's the commemorating the exodus out of Egypt, the redemption from slavery to freedom, and all of the miracles that God did to us. If you recall, the Jews were enslaved by Pharaoh, and Moses went to Pharaoh saying to him, "Let my people go." Pharaoh said no. So God started punishing the Egyptians with a series of plagues and punishments. Blood and hail and darkness and lice and locust and boils and you name it. And the last of those things was the slaying of every firstborn of Egyptian man and beast. And the Jews were instructed to slaughter a lamb and with its blood make a mark on the doorway so that the angel of death will see that and he will pass over on to the next house. So they did just that. And the next morning, the Egyptians rose and saw every firstborn of the Egyptian man and beast slain. And that's when Pharaoh said, "Okay, go." And the Jews were in such a hurry because they did not want to change Pharaoh to change his mind, that they didn't even wait for the dough to rise and therefore ate unleavened bread. So as the text says, "And it came to pass the time that the Passover lamb must be slaughtered, the time of unleavened bread, when Jesus said unto two of his disciples, Go into town, follow a man carrying water, where he entereth, and ask the goodman of the house, saying, Our master says, Where wilt thou that we make the Passover meal? And he will show you to a large upper room." Notice we climbed some steps. We are here in an upper room. There prepare and make ready. And why does this look so different? Because everything was done during the time of the Romans. The Romans did not want this place to become a room of veneration, so they closed it up. And so it remained closed for about 300 years. But then Constantine converted to Christianity and made it the official religion of the state. And so everybody started mass converting to Christianity, because if they were of the religion of the state, they paid less taxes. And so everything that is important to the Christians is now opened up and glorified and magnified. But in 614, the Muslims come and they destroy this place. And in 636, the Persians come and they destroy it. In 636, the Muslims come, and to spite the Christians, they convert this into a mosque. But then the Crusaders come and kick the Muslims out, once again convert this into a Christian holy site. But of course, their victory isn't long-lasting. In 1187, the Mamelukes kick out the Crusaders, and once again, this becomes a Muslim site. And in 1517, the Turks come, and they, for a change, are a little bit more tolerant of everything else. So what have we got here? We've got here a floor of who knows when, granite columns such as that one over there, imported from Rome during the Byzantine period. We have the Capitol that is typical of the Crusaders, the intermingling arches that are medieval. Over there we have what is called the Maghrab that exists in every mosque, indicating the direction of prayer towards Mecca, the arabesque style windows, the Arabic writing, and the red, black, and white, which is typical of the Mamelukes. So all in all, we have here a salad of cultures. And to top it all, when we think Last Supper, the very first thing that jumps into our image, into our mind, is the image of Leonardo da Vinci's painting. But of course, Leonardo da Vinci wasn't ever here, and he doesn't know what there is here. He only painted what he imagined there must have been. So it looks extremely different to everything else. But it does not really matter, because it doesn't really matter even if it was here, because it doesn't change anything if it was 50 meters that way or 100 meters that way. The event is what is important and not the walls that surround it. And so if we agree that according to tradition, this is the room of the Last Supper, then another story takes place here 50 days later when all the disciples gather and the Holy Spirit comes down on them and they start speaking in tongues. And how do we say in Greek, 50 days, Pentecost, the Pentecostal event. And finally, my friends, we are standing now in front of the holiest place in the world for the Jewish people, the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. The only thing that remains of the Jewish temple that was destroyed in the year 70 AD. However, and contrary to what I just told you, this wall behind me was never a part of the temple. When Herod wanted to rebuild the second temple, he had plans to do something so big, so grand, so extravagant and luxurious, that the size of the Temple Mount wasn't large enough to house such a structure. And because Herod was not the kind of man to go about changing his mind, he decided instead to change the topography. He ordered the building of 4 gigantic walls around the Temple Mount, refilled them with dirt, thus creating a platform on top of which he rebuilt the second temple as big and grand as he wanted to in the first place. And when the temple was destroyed, what remained was the western wall of the platform that supported the temple. And the Jews have been calling this the Wailing Wall because for 2,000 years we've been coming here praying, crying, mourning the fact that we do not have a temple. Nor can we have one right now, because over the exact same place where the first and second temple stood and where the third temple stands today, stands today, the Dome of the Rock, the golden dome on top of this platform, which, as I said, is not a mosque, but nevertheless a holy site for the Muslims. And as long as it is there, the temple cannot be built, the Messiah cannot come, and it is a vicious circle, the source and root of all our political, social, and religious problems in the country. There's also a tradition that says that if you express wishes next to the wall, be it in writing or orally, that those wishes will come true. So why don't you run along now? I'll give you 10 minutes and meet you right here. Gentlemen, you need to go to this side and you need to have a head cover. If you don't have a hat, you could just borrow one from there. Ladies, you walk to that side over there. You do not require a head cover. You can if you want to. So 10 minutes from now, see you here. Hello friends, my name is Zvi Harpaz and I'm a tour guide in Israel. Behind me is the magnificent menorah. In front of me, on the other side, is the Israeli Knesset. And I would love to invite you to come and see all those places with me. Come to Israel, look for me, Zvi Harpaz. I'll be happy to show you my beautiful country.